let's jump in to case study number 1, which is black and white as your last resort. Now I say this because I want you guys to think of black and whiting truly as your last resort, but you are going to be in certain situations where there is literally no room to do anything. You don't have room to place lights, you don't have room to do anything, and this bathroom is kind of one of those examples. So this was actually taken during our Bahamas workshop. I'm going to go ahead and jump into Lightroom, and you guys can kind of follow along. The shot was taken on a 5D3 at 50 millimeters, is on a 50 millimeter prime, at f2, 1/160 of a second, and ISO 800. The room is absolutely tiny. Like this is like it almost felt like a closet bathroom type thing where it was just a toilet, a mirror, and there's no space for even 2 people to fit in there. So we're in this tiny room and we're not really placing down lights, we're not doing anything. And what I was teaching is, if you have to, you can get a really nice natural light shot of the groom off of, say, the mirror with this type of a composition. And you'll see that he's framed kind of on the right third, and we have 2/3 worth of kind of foreground element type stuff. And shoot it to basically be a black and white image. And the reason why is because the image doesn't have any good color to really preserve. You'll notice that, I'm gonna turn off my information. If I adjust my white balance, and let's just do this. Let's shrink down the that little bottom bar so we have a little bit less distractions. If I bring my temperature down, notice that like the underlying color really is not that great to begin with. Yeah, we can add some tint, get the temperature kind of where it should be, and it looks better. But still, there's nothing about the color in this image that makes me want to preserve it as color. And what you'll notice is, if we flip it to virtually any black and white, it's gonna look pretty dang good. So I'm gonna show you guys from the presets, soft black and white. This is gonna have a softer kind of look and feel to it. It's really designed more for bridal portraits. For the groom stuff, I would go with a standard or a vivid, or even like, sorry, there's vivid, and then we would brighten this up basically, so we'd bring the exposure up a little bit, or even like an HDR black and white, which has kind of a little bit more of like this, I wanna say like kind of a more gritty look to it, which for the guys and for black and white photos, it works out very, very well. So that's as simple as it can be with images like this. So keep in mind that black and white as a last resort is a great option. And what I would do on this image is probably lift a little bit of the shadows just a little more. And I'm gonna throw on there just a radial filter. So if I were to just grab this radial filter with a burn, just a 0.5 exposure burn, and pull it out from him. By the way, we have a full section on post-production in this course, so be sure to check that out as well. I'm not gonna go into complete depth on what we're doing right now, because we're gonna do a full course on it. So you can see that from the before to the after. Well, let's actually show you guys the actual before. So let's create a virtual copy of this. I'm just gonna press Control'', and then let's go ahead and reset this out. Alt-Shift-R. I always get myself messed up when I go to Mac versus my PC. Alt-Control-R. Alt-Control-Shift-R. Just freaking reset it out already. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm just gonna press the reset button. Okay, so side by side, let's take a look at these 2 images. Okay, we're gonna select them both and go into compare view. And you can see that the black and white actually looks pretty decent. And all it was just a natural light photograph in kind of a crappy, dingy bathroom. So that's it for case study number 1. Black and white can be your last resort. Remember that. Let's move on. Case study number 2, ambient warmth can be nice. I'm gonna show you exactly what I mean, and I want you to watch closely. Let's go ahead and look at our comparison images. Now, both these images were taken in our Bahamas workshop, and we're demonstrating how ambient warmth can really do a lot for adding just a little bit of extra, I don't know, a little bit of oomph, a little bit of production value. It has a more kind of natural quality feel to it, but it has to be done right. We tell you all when you walk into a room, turn off the overhead tungsten lights, because those, especially when the windows are open and you have daylight coming through the windows, the overhead tungsten is going to create issues in mixed lighting over skin. But when is mixed lighting actually a good thing? Well, it's when we are not necessarily mixing the light over the subject's face. So for example, if you actually look at these 2 images, this shot where they were taken right in the same moment, we just removed the lamp from the first image. So the first image has the lamp, and then we took it out to demonstrate what it would look like without it. It was taken on a 5D3 on the Canon 50mm lens. It's a 1.2L lens, but it'll look the same on really virtually any of the 50mm lenses. It was at 1/250 at f2 and ISO 100. Now, the big thing here is that you'll notice the lamp is in the background, and so it adds like this nice bit of illumination. I'm gonna watch this. This is so cool. I can actually draw right on my PowerPoint. So got some light coming out here. It's like on the walls, on here. But notice that the light is not actually hitting Ryan in the face, and that's the big part of it, is that we don't have any light spilling onto his face. If the mixed lighting is coming from tungsten lights, it's gonna drop down and hit him in the face, and then we create mixed lighting situations. So long as we separate the mixed lighting, it can create a really cool background effect. And you'll find that when that mixed lighting is removed from the frame, we get an image on the right side that's just a little bit more static. It feels a little bit more kind of, I guess the word that I would use is like cleansed. So it almost feels like it's just a little bit more plain to me. Now, not to say that either of these images are great images. Like, I would totally say that this is a keeper and this is a keeper. I would just choose to shoot one way or the other. And the warmth in this image, for me, it makes for an image that has a little bit more production value, has a little bit more interest in the image than the one on the right. But both of them are totally deliverable and totally okay techniques to use. It's a matter of what fits you. So let's go and look at the next one. You guys can kind of see, like, once he starts putting on his jacket and we keep the lamp in, compared to that first image, again, we have a lot of extra depth and just color that really balances well with the dark suit. Like, the dark suit had these hints of blue in it, and that ambient warmth is yellow, and these colors are complementary. Like that yellow orange versus that kind of dark blue. It has a very complementary look to the scene, and it looks very natural, yet it has a very high production value to it. So what is the main trick when using ambient warmth? It's to make sure that it's separated from the primary light on the subject's face. So in the background, it's a great element that you can draw interest to. Keep in mind that I also frame these images. Notice that I place the light close to the face. Why? Because the light is one of the brighter areas of the frame, and I'm using it close to the face to kind of keep our attention up towards Ryan's face on all these different shots. So we want to use those in conjunction with where our subject is placed to kind of draw attention in on the composition. That's it for this case study. Let's move on. Case study number 3. So what about adding a warm kicker or a rim light for additional interest in addition to that kind of nice ambient background light? Well, I'm gonna show you what that looks like. We're gonna go again back to our Bahamas shoot with Ryan. And what that light is we're actually using, you can use a whole number of things. You could use a Lowell GL1, you could use a ice light, you can use a simple, inexpensive $20 LED light that you'd find on Amazon. You can use whatever tool that you have or whatever fits the budget. Anything will work for this. But all we're doing is I have an assistant holding that light up kind of just behind Ryan and off to the left side of him. And what you'll notice is without that kicker and rim, this is a 5D Mark III on a 50mm 1.2L at 1/250 f2 and ISO 100. Same exact things, same exact shot, same everything. The difference being we added the kicker. So look at this. I'm gonna go ahead and select my pan. And what you end up noticing is that on this side, the hair and the background, they almost kind of fall into each other. So they kind of get a little bit dark, and when you go to print, or even if the exposure was a little bit darker, you'd kind of lose the edge of his head and his body, like when it comes down to the suit. You kind of have a hard time defining where Ryan stops and where the background starts. So a rim or a kicker is a great light to add because what it does is it adds an edge to the person. So now we can see that the edge on the hair and on the ear and on the neck, it's clearly defining where Ryan stops and where the background starts. It adds a lot of interest and a lot of shape to the image, and you'll also notice that it actually chisels out the jawline. Why? Because we create a highlight on the jaw versus on this side we don't have that. This is one of those techniques that takes a lot of refinement and subtlety to kind of hone, because what I want you guys to do is avoid all the mistakes that I used to make when doing these types of shots. So once again, take a look at this. This is with that warm ambient light. This is with the ambient light that background lamp removed, but with that little rim light added. So you can see it right here. You can see it right on his jaw. We have that kicker and rim right on these edges. So you can see, and what is the rule that we defined in the last video? We said Mixed lighting is okay so long as it doesn't mix with the primary light on the person's face. That's why this is okay. Because daylight coming in from the right side right here is not mixing with the tungsten light. The tungsten light is as a rim, it's on the back, on the jawline, and it's not mixing across the front of that daylight. So it follows the same rule, and that's kind of what I wanted to state, is that we're not placing the light source over another light source of a different color temperature. So that's why it's working. And it adds a lot of depth and interest in the shot, at least in my opinion. Like if you compare this shot to this one where his jaw is kind of chiseled out and it has a really nice look to it, you can choose to keep a lamp or to remove the lamp. Either way, it looks nice, it looks natural, and it's great. So what do we not want to do with this kicker? On the left side, we have an example of what not to do. You'll notice that the kicker right now, that rim light, is too powerful. So what we get is, we get very brightened hair. It's also placed in a bad position, and what's happening is we're spilling light onto this area of the face, okay? Right next to his eye, like the temple of the face, the temple of the head. We don't want to spill light onto that spot in the face. We're starting to cross over into the natural daylight coming through the window. So you'll notice that we're actually spilling light. This is what we want to avoid. We want to avoid hitting the temple right here because we're getting close to basically mixing these two light sources, the natural daylight coming from the right versus the tungsten coming from the left. This is because that light is not placed behind Ryan enough. It's kind of more on the same level as him as opposed to being behind. You'll also notice that it spills onto the collar line right here. It just looks messy and too powerful. So in the shot on the right, you'll notice that we've dialed down the power, so it's much more subtle. You'll notice that it just chisels out the jawline right here, has a nice effect over the collar, but it's not overpowering. We remove it from the temple, and it does exactly what it should do without being overpowering. So that's what we're looking for, is trying to make sure that it's a very subtle addition to the image and not an overpowering one. So take a look at these previous examples. Again, subtle additions to kind of chisel out, subtle additions to chisel out, not becoming kind of obnoxious or too overpowering in the photograph. So that's it for case study number 3. Let's go ahead and move on. Case study number 4, watching your lens and your angles. Now, all of these case studies are about refinement, and this is one of my favorite ones because you're gonna see how big of a deal facial angle and lens choice is in your images of just, well, in general, like whether you're shooting a male or a female subject, it makes a huge difference. Let's jump in. Enough with the talk. So this first shot, this was actually from year 2 from our Bahamas workshop. This is Dane, and we have Dane here in a couple different poses because I wanted to demonstrate to the class basically facial symmetry and how different angles of the face are gonna make different impacts on facial features. So what do you notice in the first shot? Dane is looking straight into the camera. Now, when you're looking straight into the camera, every single person is gonna have dissymmetry in the face at some place, okay? All of us. So the more symmetric a person's face is, the more symmetrical, the more based on traditional beauty standards they're considered beautiful. And people will find that celebrities or beautiful celebrities have very, very symmetrical faces, at least more than the average person. But all of us to some degree have dissymmetry. Now, when you ask somebody to look directly into a camera, this is where you can identify all the dissymmetry. So if somebody has dissymmetry in the face, making them look straight onto a camera is the worst position that you could possibly do, because that is exactly how you reveal symmetry, or the lack thereof. So what you'll notice is with Dane looking straight onto the camera, his nose is actually going a little bit to the right. We can actually see that one eye is slightly lower than the other eye, and there's a little bit of a curve kind of in the eyebrow right here. We can see like the jawline is not quite straight on both sides, and so the chin drops down a little bit lower on this side. So it's very much, Dane is a great looking guy, but that position on the face is not necessarily the best for him. Okay, so let's go to the image next to that. So this image, we have Dane, we talked about breaking the plane of the face, right? So when you're posing, we don't want to break the plane of the face with the nose. Now what that means is, if I turn my face too much to the side, you'll see, well, if the nose is contained within this edge of my face, I haven't broken the plane. If the nose extends beyond that edge of the face, then we've broken the plane of the face with the nose. Now, If you do that all the way to the side, it becomes a profile shot. Somewhere in between, you get this look here, and it's not a good look. And the reason why is because, I'm gonna draw this for you guys. This shot emphasizes the size of the nose because we actually have the nose protruding from that little plane of the face right here. So if somebody has a larger nose, and this is particularly the case for Mediterranean people, Persian people, Indian people like me, we have that little hook in the nose. I don't necessarily like that hook, and I don't want it to be like the main feature of a photograph. So when I get photographed, I don't want my nose to break the plane. If it breaks the plane, it's going to be emphasized. So look at the shot on the right. This is the one keeper shot. This is where his nose, his face is at an angle. So again, we're not revealing. You'll notice that it looks like his nose is actually completely straight. It looks like his jawline is completely straight. It looks like everything is symmetrical from this angle. What's interesting is that we're actually shooting from the side of the face that is non-symmetrical. So a general rule of thumb when you're choosing a side to photograph, shoot from the side of non-symmetry. Okay, there's a reason for that. If my eye on this side is a little bit smaller than my eye on this side, or if it's placed a little bit higher, a little bit lower, or if my nose is going to this side a little bit, if I position the face and shoot from this side, that's what I should be doing. Because anything that's further away from the camera is going to be exaggerated, right? So if this eye is smaller and I turn this side to the camera, and so this eye is closer to the camera and this side is smaller to begin with, then this eye is going to be exaggerated. The size and the smallness of the eye will be exaggerated. Whereas if I turn to this side, this eye is closer to the camera, this eye naturally is further away from the camera, so it's naturally smaller, and we basically even out the eyes. So I do this all the time. If I have a bride or groom that has one eye that's a little bit smaller, I'll shoot with that eye closer to the camera. If the nose is hooking to one direction, I'll actually shoot with the nose hooking into the camera. Because if it's going away from the camera, it gets exaggerated. So we shoot from the side in general, that is the non-symmetrical side. If you find that, you shoot from one side or the other and one side just looks better, then go from the other side. Obviously, we don't, again, state these things to our subject. We just make mental notes of it as we're going. We say, I really love this look. I love the way that this looks. I want you guys to look to this, or I want you to do this. But we don't say, man, this side of your face isn't very symmetrical. I'm going to shoot from that side. That'd be terrible. Don't ever do that. Okay, so also we notice with the nose, it's not breaking the plane of the face, and notice how it doesn't look to be as large as on this side. Okay, so this looks to be much larger, whereas this side, it looks more natural, straight, it looks great. All right, let's go on to the next one. Once again, the nose on this left side is breaking that plane of the face. So here's the face, and then the nose goes right outside of it, okay? It exaggerates the curve, the hook of the nose, the dip in the nose, it exaggerates everything about it. When you look at the shot on the right, does the nose not look smaller? It's literally the exact same photograph, the exact same everything. Just bringing the chin back a little bit, the same person and all. So the one thing I like about the shot on the left is that we had a little bit more of a defined chin right here, whereas over here the kicker didn't quite get high enough. We need to get the kicker up high enough because you'll see that the shadow is actually going straight across the collar, and that means that it's placed at his height. We need to get that kicker up higher so it's coming down, and that way it'll chisel out the jawline and everything a little bit better. But that's just a little oversight that we had. This is again during the Bahamas workshop. This was our Indian couple, and this is Pankit. Awesome guy. Love this guy. So cool. On this side, we actually use a prism to block off the right side of the frame just to demonstrate concealing things that you don't want to reveal, adding a little bit of interest by showing reflections and that kind of stuff. Okay, let's go to the next image. So this image here. Now, this is very interesting. This goes back to angle plus lens choice. So previously we're talking about mostly facial angle and kind of angle of the camera and that kind of stuff. Now we're talking about lens choice in conjunction with angle. Take a look at this first shot. It was taken on the 5D3 with a Sigma 35 Art, and we didn't talk about the settings in the previous two images or the previous examples because it's not important. Facial angle has nothing to do with settings. I assume you guys know settings by now. Look at this though. 1/200 f1.4 and ISO 100 on the 35mm. Now, what I'm noticing here is we have this kind of exaggeration that's not a good thing. His tummy and his chest, like his torso area, looks to be a little bit larger. His head looks a little bit smaller. His legs look a little bit smaller. Now, this is the natural distortion that you get in a wider angle lens that it's just going to distort objects that are closer to the edges. And we're shooting portrait aspect ratio, so it's going to distort a little bit and kind of extend the length of. It can be great when you're using it for a model, like for a female model where you want to exaggerate and extend the legs. It can be great, but it has to be used well. I noticed that it wasn't super flattering, and so I switched on to the, after this next shot. So you'll notice that I took a different angle first. So I go, okay, well this angle's not the best. Let me get up a little bit higher. So I stood up a little bit higher so I'm going top down. Now his head is more in proportion with his body, okay? So his head and his body is okay. But the legs just got shortened. So now the legs in proportion to like this torso, it looks very, very short. So the legs were like way too short here. I was like, I just made him look like he's 5 feet tall, you know, as opposed to 6 feet, which he actually is. So what I did at that point was I switched on to the 50mm lens and stood back a little bit further. And what you notice is immediately we get okay proportions on the head, okay proportions on the chest, and okay proportions on the legs. The legs now appear to be much longer. So here versus here, it goes down to about here, okay? The chest appears to be the right proportion, and the head is not overly small like it is right here. So look at the head right here. It's just, the head is tiny if you compare proportions on each of these to the torso, to the legs. Okay, so this is a much more balanced image with good proportion, and this is where I would shoot this. So if you're getting these kind of exaggerated and unflattering looks where your subject doesn't look in proportion, look at your lens choice. It makes a huge, huge difference. This is so much more flattering than the other two images. Take a look at this too. By the way, this one, his nose is getting very close to breaking the plane, not quite. I pulled it back on this shot, so it looks a lot better, a lot more natural. We have a better chisel on the jawline. It looks great. Look at these next two. Compare that first image now to these two shots, okay? Looking off, we're shooting top down. We have the 50mm again, in proportion, looks great. We're cropping the frame at a tapering point. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see other photographers making with their crops. You generally want to crop when the legs and the body are going in, not out. If I crop, like say right here where the body is actually going out and it's widening, if I were to crop right there, it's going to make the person look far larger than they actually are because they're extending out towards the edge of the frame. We crop at tapering points because we want to make it look like they're getting skinnier exiting the frame, and the mind thinks that this person is skinny as opposed to thinking that this person is getting bigger. So watch those crops, look at the angle, everything looks great. These two images are so much more flattering than that first shot, even the other two shots. Okay, so these first two shots. So angle is huge. In general, you're better off you're gonna get a more flattering look in general with a slight top-down direction towards your clients. That being said, be careful with the guys. We're shooting a little bit top-down. I think Rahul is about 5 foot 10 inches. I'm 6 feet 1. So I'm shooting maybe like 2 or 3 inches above him going down towards him. Don't go too much on a guy. Why? Because shooting top-down on anybody softens their appearance, whereas shooting bottom up makes them dominate the frame. But in general, shooting bottom up isn't as flattering of an angle for the body because of the way that it distorts the body. So when you're shooting the guys, a slight bit of a top-down direction is okay, but if you go too extreme, you're gonna make them feel kind of emasculated. They're gonna not look very masculine, they're gonna feel like kind of diminished in the frame. We wanna avoid that. Slight top-down, control the facial angle, look at your lens choice, look at the way that you're cropping, and go for it from there. That's it for this case study. Let's go on to the next one. Case study number 5. Ladies and gents, if you got junk, light it. I'm not talking about junk in your trunk. I'm not talking about any other type of junk. All you guys out there, get that out of your heads. What I'm talking about is we're all gonna be in situations, whether you're photographing the bride, the groom, where the room just doesn't look good. It could be a tiny room. It could be a room that's just a disaster zone because everybody's prepping inside of it. Whatever it is, the easiest way to get out of that situation, well, if you can't literally get out of that situation, is to light it. Light your way into a great photograph. How do you do this? Simple. We've taught you guys throughout this course, and this video is going to show you again. You're going to place a light only on the subject that you're photographing, darken everything else down. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the image because it's important that we darken without darkening too much. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to get from this image on the left to a silhouette to this nicely lit, dramatic portrait of our groom. This is where we're starting. So this is on the 5D Mark III, Canon 100mm prime, that's the macro, at 1/200 f2.8 and ISO 3200. This was at Jeremy and Olivia's wedding, and Olivia is like the closest thing I have to a sister. That's actually not my sister. But like many guys, Jeremy was getting prepped in a hotel that was very humble, very simple, small room, nothing to be like super impressed about. A lot of our grooms are doing that. It's the bride that gets the really nice suite. The groom kind of just gets ready at some casual place. Now, this is a natural light photograph we're obviously exposing for his skin tones and the back windows right here that kind of blow out. So all this is basically goes white. And we have this kind of like image that it's nice. It's nothing like too crazy or impressive or anything like that. We placed him over the highlight in the frame so that we kind of draw attention into him. These are a little bit boring, like the drapes and everything, it doesn't look that great. And overall the shot is just a little bit boring. Like, I don't feel like it chisels out his jawline very well. Everything feels very muted. It's not very interesting or masculine. Like, it's just not a great image. So step number one, we need to darken down the scene. This is the trick. When you're doing this, don't darken the scene down so much that everything goes black. Darken it so there's detail in the shadows without actually clipping the shadows. That's probably the number one biggest mistake that photographers are gonna make with this technique, is they darken everything else down so much that everything is just black. When it prints, it's not gonna look good. You want some presence there so that you have an image that still sets the scene. You don't want this photograph of somebody just standing in the middle of blackness. So from this, we go to the next shot. Now this middle shot is basically ISO 400, I believe. So we went from 3200 to 16 to 8 to 4. So that's 3 stops pulling everything down. Everything else stays the same. We also lowered the white balance in the camera to somewhere around 3600 Kelvin. For the final shot, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to this shot. All we've done is we've added a flash off to camera right. So camera right has the flash. Camera right, okay? That flash has a CTO plus grid. We used a Magmod system, so it's very simple to add onto this, and it's flashing into this side, and you can see that we have this nice little Rembrandt light. So the Rembrandt light is noted by that little highlight on the side of the cheek. Okay, so if I were to select that, actually, why do I want to draw all over my image like that? Let's just erase that guy out. Okay, so how do we get this look? Well, the placement of the flash is what's crucial for this, and I think I still have a little red dot on his face. Let's get that out. That's not part of the image, guys. I promise. Actually, yeah, it's not part of the image. It's either part of my screen or something else. What is that? There we go. Got it. Okay. So, this is the important part. I want to show you guys the placement of the lighting, because that's how we're getting this dramatic look, where if you notice, the shadows, there's still detail. We still have detail in the majority of the shadows. We have detail over here, we have detail over here. It's not blackened out, okay? Now I just literally wrote over the spot that I was gonna diagram out the setup, so let me erase that. So let me give you guys a top-down view of the room. So here is the wall, and here's the window that goes right across, okay? And in front of the window, we have that little curtain. I don't know why I just did that. That was like a nice little pulse. And then in front of the curtain, we have the blackout curtain. So the blackout curtain is like right here, okay? So this is the shearing curtain, this is the blackout curtain. Now Jeremy is placed about right here. Okay, so this is Jeremy, top-down view. Here's his shoulders, so lovely. The camera is right here, shooting towards Jeremy. The number one mistake that people are gonna make in placing the flash itself is they're gonna place it to the right of Jeremy. And what that's gonna do is it's not gonna give you a dramatic or as dramatic of a light. What we wanna do is, rather than placing the flash directly to the right of him, we place it behind, okay? So this flash is gonna be right here, and it's gonna fire towards him with the grid, and then we make him look towards the right. So this is actually his left. So when he turns his face towards that, his chest is towards the camera, when he turns his face towards that light, That light comes from behind and spills a little bit onto this side of the cheek. We get a beautiful outline. We get this really great look where now we have a rim light from the window light on this side that chisels them out on that side. We have this great main light on this side that gives us detail to the face, gives us nice definition across the hands and in action. And that's how we get the photograph. So that's the biggest thing here, is the way that we are placing that light. And we go from this, where we don't have a chiseled out jawline, where we don't have detail, we don't have a very masculine looking image, to this. Look at the shadow and the line right here on the jawline and the chin that goes up. And it's just a dramatically better photograph in a room that is very plain, very standard. All we had to do was light it to get to a ordinary to extraordinary photograph. That's it for this tutorial. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Case study number 6, zombie apocalypse, and you gotta get a great groomsman photograph. Now, what this is this is worst case scenario. You've got junk, you've got a room that doesn't look good, it's just nothing is working out. What we're gonna do is we're gonna build onto the prior technique of lighting, but we're gonna add in other things. So not only gonna light it, but we're also gonna add in a prism, we're also gonna incorporate reflections. We're basically using different objects to conceal the frame at this point to block things out. So let me show you guys what we mean. So this shot is of Heath during the workshop, and what I wanted to demonstrate is this is just a plain room and everything like that, but this is on the 5D3 Sigma 85, and this was at 1/200 of a second, f1.4 at ISO 1600, and I think we put a black and white kind of filmic look to this, so it has a nice bit of grain on the image. Now, when you look at this photograph, honestly, the room isn't anything bad. It's actually a really great room, but I want you to imagine it's a not a good room, okay? So over here though, we do notice that we have like this little bed frame right here. So we got this stuff, we also got this stuff on this side. Let's assume that just there was a bunch of crap in here. Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna eliminate, by step number 1, is incorporating our prism. So all we did is the exact same photograph, okay? Exact same settings, exact same everything. The only difference is on this side, we brought in the prism to pull in reflections from outside. So what we're actually seeing now is like the trees and objects that are outside. And this can be really nice, especially if your outside the window is like maybe something really nice. Like there's a lot of really tiny, not so good looking hotels, but that are on the shore of a beach. So the hotel is really cool. It's just the room itself isn't that great. And you can reflect the outside ocean into the photograph with the prism by simply holding it up to the lens. So that is one option. Let's go to the next image. This is using option number 1. We talked about this with Jeremy, got a bad scene, light it. So all we have here is we have the wall, we have that blackout curtain, and this time we just extended the blackout curtain all the way across the frame. We left enough exposure there where you could see the highlights coming across the edge of the curtains, and it goes black behind him. So it creates kind of a nice little background. We leave it as a very dark exposure this go around. Heath is placed right here. Here's this lovely broad shoulders again. Camera, okay? And then we have that light again placed right behind, angled towards him. Heath is looking to the left. Same exact thing that we did last time. 5D Mark III, Sigma 85, we just darkened on the scene to 1/100th, f2 and ISO 400 with the Magmod grid. Exact same setup. Option number 3. So if option number 1 has got a bad scene, light it. Option number 2 has got a bad scene, use a prism to block it out. Option number 3 is use a combination of these things. So when we go to the next image, you'll notice that what we have now is we can pull in reflections from the outside using the prism. Now granted, the outside of this shot was streets and cars and all this kind of stuff, which doesn't necessarily look awesome, but it is blurred enough that you don't really recognize it too much. But we can add a lot of extra interest by placing a reflection of the outside to conceal anything that might not be appealing. Again, this curtain is totally fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but let's assume that you're in a bad room and there's just not any room in the frame. So here we're doing the same thing of lighting Heath, but now we're adding the additional step of using the prism in conjunction. So now with these two options, we can darken down the scene and add light to our subject. We could use a prism to conceal objects in the room, or we could literally do both. We can darken down the scene, we can add light to our subject, and use our prism or use any other front element object. We'll talk about tons of things in our creative effect course. We can use those to block out those objects that are unappealing. You can also use the room itself, use objects in the room itself. There's tons of different options there. So This is worst case scenario, zombie apocalypse type situation where groomsmen photos are still important. Because usually during a zombie apocalypse, people will be running for their lives. But we'll assume that this one has a wedding going on in the midst of it. Next case study. Case study number 7 is to incorporate family and friends during groom prep. Most of the time this is gonna happen naturally. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the groom doesn't have someone there to help along, or maybe they're just kind of all doing their own thing. I like to ask important VIPs. It could be a brother, it could be a sister, it could be a best friend, anybody that's there to help out. I'm gonna show you guys an example of this because what we have here this is one of the coolest weddings I've ever photographed. This is from Michael and Tom. And when Michael was getting ready, they're actually both of their getting ready shots. So you'll notice that this shot and this shot, this is actually the exact same room. It's a very small room with a window light on one side. It's just a tiny little bedroom inside of this hotel room. But both of them were getting ready in the same place. Now what we did was we actually had Michael go first and get ready, and this was his best friend who's helping him to get ready. So she comes in, and the scene in and of itself is not anything great, but by incorporating our VIPs, it becomes something great and meaningful to Michael. So this was on a 5D Mark III. This was on the 50mm art at 1/2 of a second, f1.4 and ISO 1600, and it's not a crazy awesome room or anything like that, so this is where we go black and white. This is the soft black and white 12A from the presets. When we brought Michael out, or we took Michael out, we brought Tom in, we just flipped directions. So to make it look like a different room, all we're doing now is just shooting the opposite direction. So if in this shot, the room setup was kind of like this, where the window was coming from this side and we're shooting this direction. Now for this shot, the room is still set up like this, the window is coming from this side, we're just shooting this way, okay? So same exact room, but just shooting a different angle, and we can kind of simulate 2 different rooms and 2 different times and getting ready. This was Tom's brother who's helping him to get ready, and we suggested this because they didn't necessarily have this in mind. And the room in and of itself is not anything crazy grand and so forth. And so I said, Tom, why don't you have your brother help you to kind of get ready? This kind of a photograph to me, and I would think to our clients, is gonna make such a, it's just more meaningful and more impactful than were I just to ask Michael and Tom to get ready individually by themselves. So again, this was on the Sigma 35 art, 1/160 of a second, f1.4 and ISO 1600, and same thing with that soft black and white preset. So this is a short and sweet video just to say that sometimes if these things aren't happening on their own, it might take some of your coaxing and kind of photojournalistic or kind of posed photojournalistic mindset to maybe help them push these things along a little bit. Think when it comes to these types of photographs, what is going to make the most meaning to the clients, help set it up, and then give them a little bit of a cue and a direction to pose, not to pose, but to get the natural emotion and expression out of them. The biggest thing we want to retain is that journalistic look of natural expressions, natural interaction and so forth that gives meaning to an image that might otherwise look posed and kind of just set up. So that's it. Incorporate the VIPs into your preparation. Case study number 8, I got no pockets. What do I do with my hands? I'm gonna tell you right here. So for certain types of cultural weddings, like say for example, Indian weddings, the outfits that they're wearing oftentimes don't actually have pockets. These are traditional Indian outfits for weddings, traditional Indian attire, and there are no pockets that make sense to basically put their hands into. So we've talked about before where, like, if you have a groom, we want to give the hands purpose, right? So we need to either pose one hand, we can leave the other hand at rest, or we can at least put a hand in the pocket or do something. We need to do something to give the hands purpose. We don't want the hands generally at 90-degree angles unless we're drawing emphasis to something. We don't want hands up in the air, not really doing anything without a sense of purpose to them. If they're adjusting a tie, that's great, but if they're just up for no reason, it's gonna feel awkward. So what do? We pose one hand and we leave one hand at rest. The same rules apply. The differences are that, well, when you're photographing, like say an Indian groom, if you're to leave both hands at rest, it can look awkward. Now, particularly for these types of outfits, these traditional Indian outfits like this one, there is this draping that's referred to as a dupatta. And the draping is designed to go across his arm. So he's literally supposed to hold his arm at 9 degrees. And so you'll notice for these types of shots, we have his arm oftentimes at 9 degrees. We might place his hand on the lapel. We might place it just across his chest. It doesn't really matter. But because the design of the outfit is designed to do that, it makes sense that his hand is at 90 degrees. This is the one time that like a 90-degree angle, it's fine. It's designed for that clothing. And it would actually look awkward if we brought the hand up more or down more, because that's not how you're supposed to wear the dupatta. But notice that the other rules still apply. Like we have posed one hand and we leave the other hand at rest. So on the left side, this is on a 5D3 7200. This is actually waiting for the first look. The bride's gonna come down this aisle. And this is at 160 per second, f2.8 and ISO 100. All we've done is just let the other hand fall naturally at rest. We do a close-up shot looking across the shoulder. His hand is still at that 90-degree angle. The other hand is still at rest. And it looks fine because why? Well, if you think in reality, the rule was don't give the hand energy or place it in an up direction when there's no purpose for it being there. So while our eye is drawn to the hand being up, we then quickly realize that the reason for it is because he's holding the dupatta, and it becomes okay. So when you see it, you're like, oh, his hand's up. Oh, but it makes sense because it's part of the attire. So that's totally fine. Remember that in this kind of a situation, it is okay to be doing that. Let's go across to the next one. Once again, we have one hand placed up with the dupatta, and then the other hand is just placed at rest. We actually have him holding on to the dupatta on a lower angle. So again, we're not having him mirror by both hands doing the exact same thing. For the other guys, I just told them basically to do the same thing. They don't have pockets again in their clothing. So I don't have them putting their hands in their pockets. I just have them doing something with their hands. So for him, he's having, look at this guy right here. He's got both hands just right at rest. Let me go ahead and switch back to my pen tool actually so I like to drawing. I like to draw. Pen. Okay, so he's got both hands at rest right here. He's got one arm around him and one arm kind of behind, probably around him. He's got one arm around and one arm at rest. He's got one arm at rest, one arm around. He's got two arms around, one arm at rest. So again, they're all doing something a little bit different, and that's what makes it feel natural. We're posing at least one of the hands. Each hand is doing something a little bit different. The hand that's not being posed is at rest at the side, and it's okay. If they have no pockets, it's okay to leave the hand at rest at the side. It's even okay to put one hand in a pocket and leave one hand hanging out of a pocket. That's totally fine too. Let's keep going. So again, right at 90 degrees, he's holding on to the dupatta, the same thing. Natural hands. His hands are kind of in action, but look at this. His hands are in action as if he's making kind of like a gesture or whatever, and his face kind of signals that. So it's totally fine that his hands are a little bit up and he's kind of joking around and having fun. Everything looks good because this is an in-action type shot. So as their hands come up for an in-action shot, if they're talking and dialoguing, and like all people that love to use their hands when they talk, if they're doing that in action while talking, it's fine. There's a purpose for the hands being in action, which is the fact that they like to speak with their hands and they're in action. So it's good. Let's go on. This one, once again, we have all the guys doing something a little bit different. If they're not doing anything with their hands, they're leaving it at rest. The one thing we do want to avoid, I'll show you on the actual first photograph, is this guy is actually making a fist. We want to generally avoid, I spell fist with apparently like two eyes and something weird. We generally want to avoid fist because it looks aggressive, okay? It looks like there's pent up stress or energy. So notice that I'm telling him, if you want to close the hand, that's fine, but don't make a fist, don't ball it up. So his hand is fine over here on this side. Everyone's hands are fine here. This one shot, he's actually making a fist. All of these are fine. I'm like, don't make a fist. If you want to leave the hands a little bit closed, that's fine. I generally like the hands to be a little bit open because I find when the fingers are a little bit closed in, like in these shots, it makes their hands look like they're a little bit stubby. Not a big deal. It's not like anybody else would notice this other than me, but I do notice it. So with the girls, look at this, same thing. Their hands are up, they're around each other's arms, they're leaving one at rest, they're doing something with the other one. Same thing, everybody's doing something a little bit different. It's okay to leave the hands outside the pockets when there are no pockets. But just remember those general rules. It's okay to leave the hands in energy when there's a purpose for the hands being there. When there's not, if there's a pocket, put one hand in a pocket, leave one hand out, put both hands in the pockets, that's totally fine. When there are no pockets, it's okay to leave the hands at rest just at the side, relax fingers, and so forth. That's it for this video. Let's go ahead and move on to our last case study. Case study number 9. This is going to be our last case study because now that you've learned all of these different techniques on lighting and shooting and everything, I need this to be the last message that you all walk away with, and that's to remove yourself from the equation and to allow for story and emotion to happen naturally. Now that you know all these things on lighting and posing and everything, your tendency right now is going to be over-involved, to be posing everything, to be shooting everything in perfect light, and to be doing all these things that you've just learned. I need to remind you to take a step back and remember that it's not your wedding day, it's not your story, it's theirs. You need to remove yourself from the equation enough to allow these stories to unfold in front of you. And I'm going to give you examples of this. This was during the groom prep, photographing the groom workshop. This is actually during lunch when Heath and his brother stepped over to the window. We're not doing a shoot, we're not doing anything. This is just me noticing that him and his brother are right at the window and they're kind of looking out and just talking and enjoying the moment. So I just grabbed my camera and I started documenting it. These types of moments are perfect moments where you can get beautiful journalistic images, especially if you can set up the room to have good light and clean up things and kind of just work your magic a little bit and then let things naturally unfold. Help direct when you need to, but otherwise stay out of it. So after I got that shot from the back, I took 2 other angles, one focused on Will, one focused on Heath. This is both, everything here is on the Sigma 85 at 1/202 f2 and ISO 200. And I thought, man, this would make for such a great spread in like an album, just him and his brother hanging out. If we were to actually print this, we'll knock out whatever junk on the window and kind of stuff like that, clean up the window. But it looks so great and so in the moment type of an image. Let's go on to this one. This is actually during a wedding I second shot for Trevor Daly. I love working with my friends, and Trevor had this opportunity for me to go up with him to Tahoe and photograph this wedding. He's a professional athlete. He's actually a professional football player. And during shooting groom prep, this was just happening naturally in front of me. And you'll notice that this room was a disaster zone. I mean, you can see, well, this is the videographer's like slider right behind what's going on here. And then all this junk was around the whole room and the floor and everything. So I took a frame outside of the room where I'm shooting in with all of his, these are fellow friends and college football players that he played on the same team with. These are all of his closest people as he's just ironing and getting ready. And I place him in the highlight of the frame. And what I would have loved to do on this shot would just be to add a light on the right side and just kick a little bit of light in there. But this was such a perfect moment, I didn't want to ruin it by trouncing across the room, setting up a flash and doing all these things. I loved the way that this looked, and I documented so that the guys are blocking out all the junk. And that's great because they're also an important piece of the image, but they are my foreground elements that are concealing everything that I don't want people to see. Now he's placed over the highlight of the frame. We darkened down most everything else. It's left black and white because the image doesn't really call for color. It doesn't have any good color to begin with. And because it's black and whited, the slider even like kind of takes a little bit less emphasis in the frame. And if we needed to remove it in post, we totally could. But these are these moments that in and of themselves, they are perfect. And if you try to go and add flash and do all these things and pose and direct, you're gonna miss them and you're gonna ruin them. So take a step back and stop interfering. As he continues to iron, these are just shots that I got of him talking with his boys. Again, I'm just shooting from the shadows. Notice that I'm shooting from the shadow side of the face, letting the highlights kind of create that nice lighting. So I'm just using the natural light in the room. We flipped off the ambient tungsten lights so we don't have overhead lighting kind of ruining anything. And then we just look for emotion and expression, capturing each of these people as they're laughing and joking around over the course of 5 or 10 minutes. So remember that. You're gonna miss these kind of moments if you're so stuck in posing and lighting every single thing. These are all shot natural light. These are all shot with the Sigma 85 at around 1/160th of a second f2 and ISO 400. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this course. We do have one additional chapter on constructive critique, kind of a bonus chapter that we're also gonna piece in here, but we'll save that for later. Now that you've learned all these different principles, I want you guys to put them into effect. Remember, your number one job is to be a storyteller. Use all the things that you've learned about lighting and posing and everything to tell stories, not to make them up, not to simulate, but to actually tell realistic stories. And your clients will love you for it. That's it. I'll see you guys in the next video.